You want to listen to me do my spiel, Jack?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Let's do that then, I guess, huh?
Ready.
Welcome back, everyone, to this week 4 edition of Bruce Monan's Computer Points podcast. I am Bruce Monan, your host, recording from our studio in Minster, Ohio, checking in this week from the greater Cincinnati area, home of the 2-1 Cincinnati Bearcats, who took the victory bell from the Miami Redhawks last week, is not our usual co-host, executive producer, and chief researcher, Rebecca Monan.
Grandpa.
As you can hear, we have a substitute co-host we had a substitute co-host lined up. They had to cancel at the last minute due to work considerations. So instead, checking in on short notice is my daughter, Alexandra Trumble, along with my grandson, Jack. Say hi, Jack. Oh, now Jack's going to be shy. Smiling. There we go. Alex and Jack may not be here long. We shall see. But Alex will be back next week as our full-blown, full podcast co-host. Jack will probably not, correct?
Correct. Because I will be traveling and will be child-free.
Yes. So we're going to put aside the usual off-topic time wasting, and we're going to get right into high school football this week.
Say woo!
Jack likes that, right? Starting in Division I, Region 1. Number 10, Findlay dropped 4 spots this week after a 54-40 loss to Oregon Clay. It's a lot of points. The Trojans should still make the playoffs, but their margin for error keeps dropping every week. And as I said, we're going to keep this a shorter podcast this week. We're going to go right to Division 2.
I don't get to ask fun questions about where is Oregon Clay?
You may, yes. Do you not know?
It's either Oregon or Clay.
Mama.
Now Jack won't be quiet. Just a hint, it's usually the first word in a 2-word school is the town. And the second word is the name of the school, usually. So for our listeners there, Oregon is, by the way, a suburb of Toledo. Findlay had a tough finding schools their side. They often have to play teams from a little bit far away. But as I said, Division 2, Region 8. We'll start with Lima Senior. They are still undefeated, 4-0. They won big this week, and I think they're going to win big every game the rest of the season. The Spartans are currently ranked number 6 in the computer points right now, and they should finish the season still ranked about number 6, even with a 10-0 record. The teams on their schedule do not have the greatest winning percentages at the moment. It was a big win this week for 2-2 Sydney over 2-2 Fairborn. That makes them much more hopeful for the playoffs, but they need to win the next 2 weeks, then perhaps against either Piqua or Troy in the last 2 weeks of the season if they want to make the postseason. 2-2 Troy still looks good for the playoffs if they can defeat either Sydney or Piqua later in the season. 1-3 Piqua also needs a win over either Sydney or Troy. You know, if these 3 teams would just get together and all agree to win one and lose one, maybe all 3 of them could make the playoffs.
Sort of like a triangle of sorts. I don't know how to say a love triangle, but a rivalry triangle.
Yeah. A rivalry triangle. I like that. Yes.
But they probably are somewhat competitive, being up the highway, right?
Oh, absolutely. And especially Piqua and Troy. That is a heated rivalry. There's no way those teams would ever get together and agree to a loss in return for a win. It would never happen.
Well, it seems like should that level of collusion become public, you may lose your entry into the playoffs anyway. Are there anti-collusion rules, or is that like betting on baseball? Like get kicked out of the game forever?
I have no idea if there's any such rules, but that does seem to go against the spirit of high school competition.
I would think so.
I would think that would have to come under the purview of the commissioner, perhaps. Who knows what would happen then?
Yes. Since this is an audio podcast, the viewers don't get to know that our cat also missed us this week and is being very attentive on this end of the computer.
Yes, the listeners do know that I had a load of cats in the house last week. They are all still here, but fortunately, my wife is now home and she is in charge of the zoo here in the house. I am off cat feeding duty, thank goodness. All right, Division 3, Region 10. We follow two teams here, sort of diametrically opposed to each other. They are both 2-2. Defiance is favored to win their final 6 games of the season. Lima Shawnee is favored to lose their final 6 games of the season. Defiance probably needs to actually win 3 of those 6 if they want to make the playoffs. Lima Shawnee could sneak in if only one more win, but as I said, they are not expected to win any games the rest of the way, and their next 3 games are against Defiance, Wapakoneta, and St. Mary's, so they have a tough road ahead. In Division 3, Region 12, undefeated Wapakoneta earned an important win over St. Mary's this last week. They are now favored to win the WBL, and they are favored to win the rest of their games this season. If they do, I still expect them to only finish second in this region behind Tip City, who is also undefeated at the moment and also expected to finish 10-0. Our number 8 team is Bell Fountain. They are 3-1. They gained very little this week because they defeated winless Ben Logan. They're expected to gain many more computer points if they get a win over 3-1 Indian Lake this. Just behind them at number 9, we have 3-1 Salina. They moved up 3 spots this week when they defeated 2-2 Lima Shawnee. Their next 2 games are against 1-3 Kenton and 1-3 Elida. So that means that's good news for their record. Not so much good news for their computer points. We mentioned St. Mary's. They are now 2-2 after losing to Wapakoneta. They dropped 2 places down to number 11, but Drew Pasteur's computer says they are now playoff bound, thanks to the expectation that they will win 6 games to wrap up their regular season. Division 4, Region 14. We follow 6 teams here. Napoleon is actually our highest rated in those 6, and they fell 3 spots down to number 13 after losing to undefeated Anthony Wayne this week. But they are favored in 5 of their final 6 games, so they are projected to be in the postseason. Probably will even get a host a playoff game. That'd be good news in Napoleon. I don't believe they've had a chance to host a game in a number of years.
Is that now the new type of goal to be working towards? Since there's more playoff opportunities, the goal is to have more home opportunities?
It's at least something we're looking toward more, because with 16 teams making the playoffs, a lot of teams are basically there by the time the season starts. You already know they're going to make the playoffs, and after a few games, you're sure of it. So then the goal is, can they get into the top 8 and host a playoff game? Or even better yet, get into the top 4 where they will get a host 2 games, assuming they win the first one. That assumption does not always hold true, of course.
Right. That's why they play the game.
Yes, it is. And we all know the true importance of that hosting the game. It may be worth a couple of points advantage for the team, but more importantly, it's worth a lot of money for the band boosters or whoever runs a concession stand. Not to mention saving all that gas money for the buses. Next up here in Region 14, we have 4 WBL teams all in danger of missing the playoffs. We'll start with 2-2 Ottawa Glandorf. They were the big winner of those 4 teams this week. They defeated 1-3 Elida. I have them at a 66% chance of making the postseason. 1-3 Kenton fell 6 spots this week. 1-3 Van Wert dropped 1 place as they both lost. Those 2 teams, along with Elida, each have a, I would say, 1-3 or less chance at making the postseason. Moving to Division 4, Region 16, as we try to keep things moving here this week. Undefeated Urbana still needs 3 more wins. This is not the easiest region here to make sure they get into playoffs. I think they should earn those wins, starting against 1-3 North Union this week. In 20th place right now, so not in the playoffs at the moment. We have 1-3 Bethel. They really need to beat 3-1 Covington this week to keep their realistic playoff hopes alive.
That's true for all of the teams in this region that we follow? It seems unusual compared to other regions to have to earn so many wins.
This region is going to take a lot more, as you'll find out when we get down to some of the Division 7 regions. There's some teams might get into 2 or 3 wins there. This one's going to take 6 or 7 for Urbana, partly because of who they play, but partly because it's just a tougher region. Okay, we're down to Division 5 now. Region 18, we've said we'll keep this one moving all season long. Liberty Center, still undefeated, dropped from number 1 to number 3 after they beat 2-2 Archibald 51-0 this week.
Ooh.
So two teams did pass them in the computer points, but Liberty Center, they're in the playoffs. They are now a lock to finish in the top 8 to host a game. They're going to do better than that. They're going to be in the top 4 easily by the time the season's done. Their other team is 3-1 Liberty Benton. They stayed at number 8 after they beat 2-2 Riverdale 56-6. I really think before we're done, we're going to see these two teams playing each other in the playoffs. They're both two very good teams. And again, just like Liberty Center, I expect Liberty
not
Benton.
Riverdale, the other two.
No, Liberty Benton and Liberty Center. I expect Liberty Benton here to lock up a home playoff game for themselves before all is said and done. And Alex, we have now reached our first
Scores of the Week.
You can hear the music you can hear the music now, right? In order not to cheapen the award, like last week when we had 6 scores of the week, we only have 2 this week. Here's the first one. In a game from the MAC, Versailles 18, New Bremen 17. Both teams were 3-0 coming into the game. New Bremen scored on a 61-yard touchdown pass with a little over a minute remaining in the game. Down by a point, the Cardinals went for the win, but their 2-point conversion pass failed, and Versailles held on for the 1-point victory. Now, last week, I had a lot more scores because there were all these overtime games. Not so many this week. But that one, I would have enjoyed being at that game. That Versailles-New Bremen game sounded like a good one. And the reason we mentioned that game is we are now doing Division 5 Region 20. The top team we follow in that region is Versailles. Undefeated, gained a lot of points from defeating 3-1 New Bremen last week. I think 3 more wins ensures the Tigers will have a home playoff game. Perhaps, even though they're ranked number 3, I believe they are probably the best team in this region. And perhaps the second best team is 3-1 Lima Bath, who moved up 2 spots to number 4 after beating 1-3 Kenton.
So who are number 1 and 2? Are they just expected to have earned most of their points at the beginning of the season and will earn fewer points as the season goes on? Sorry, going off script here.
Number 1 in the region is currently Jamestown Greenview. The conference they play in, not historically the toughest, not the worst either by far, but they're getting their points right now from a win over West Liberty Salem. They play a 1-3 team, an 0-4 team, and a 1-3 team the next 3 weeks. So their computer points are going to go down even if they win. The number 2 team is Preble Shawnee. They have 2 big wins over 3-1 teams right now. Their next couple of games include 2 winless teams, a 1-3 team, and a couple of 2-2 teams. So again, they may rack up the wins, but they're not going to get major computer points. I expect Versailles to pass these teams before the season's done. And if not, I expect Versailles to be favored against them come playoff time. Next, we'll go to the team that was number 1 in the standings last week, Miami East. Dropped all the way to number 6 after suffering an upset loss to 1-3 Northridge last week. Conversely, I guess you would say, 3-1 Indian Lake moved up to number 7 after they beat winless Tecumseh. So not many points there, but enough to move them up last week. Indian Lake's remaining 6 opponents have a combined record of only 7-17. So there's another team. They're going to pile up the wins, but maybe not the computer points the rest of the season. Next on our list, we have West Liberty Salem. They are 3-1. They fell 2 spots to number 12 after beating 1-3 Southeastern last. But if West Liberty Salem gets a win over 2-2 Madison Plains this week, that should make them about 99% certain of earning a playoff. So big game for West Liberty Salem this week. Now, our number 15 Milton Union, number 16 Arcanum, number 21 Graham all lost last week. Graham is pretty much out of contention for the postseason. The other two have probably an 80+% chance of still making the top 16 and qualifying for the playoffs if they can win their games this week. And that brings us right into our second and final score of the week, Alex.
Ooh.
And I picked this one just so I could pick on Rebecca a little bit.
When she's not here to defend herself.
Exactly. That's another reason we're doing it. Van Buren 21, Arlington 14. Hey, Jack.
Oh, what's that? Oh, no. He said hi that time.
Yeah, he was excited about the score of the week. And it was Van Buren 21, Arlington 14. I mentioned last week that Van Buren needed an upset win if they wanted to be in the playoffs, and that they had a decent chance against 3-0 Arlington last week. Becca seemed skeptical. She expressed some doubt about whether that would happen or not. So I feel somewhat vindicated. I kind of felt the upset coming. Not sure why, but I think Arlington was about a 10-point favorite, which, 10 points, that's not that much, right? Arlington scored all 14 of their points in the first quarter. Looked like they were going to win this game. Van Buren then scored a touchdown in each of the following quarters. And I also noticed in this game, Van Buren wore those Ohio National Guard camouflage jerseys that I despise as a stats guy because it's hard to read the numbers because they're kind of camouflage. So congratulations on the win, Van Buren. Although I wasn't so happy with the uniforms, but oh well. Can't have everything, right?
The camo did too good of a job.
And we had that score because in Division 6, Region 22, we will come across Van Buren here eventually. We'll start with 4-0 Bluffton. They continued to roll through their first 9 games of the regular season. I don't think we have to be too worried about them not winning any of their games until they face Columbus Grove in Week 10. 3-1 Spencerville fell 3 spots down to number 5 after losing big to Columbus Grove. But as I said, lots of teams are going to lose big to Columbus Grove. They are the odds-on favorite in their region, which we will get to in Division 7 a little bit later. Spencerville's odds, not a whole lot better this week. They have to face Bluffton. Undefeated 4-0 Paulding dropped from number 4 to number 7 because they beat winless Wayne Trace last week. Good for the one-loss record, bad for the computer points. They will have a 97% chance at the postseason if they can beat winless Defiance Ayersville this week. Seems wrong to have 2 winless teams back-to-back on the schedule like that.
As long as those winless teams get to play each other someday, so then they have a chance to not be winless.
Yep, and they will eventually, I'm sure. Those are in the same conference, so they'll get their shot. 3-1, Patrick Henry rose 5 places to number 8 after they beat 2-2 Evergreen. They are heavily favored against winless Bryan and 1-3 Wauseon the next 2 weeks. 3-1 Sherwood Fairview dropped 1 spot to number 10 after their second straight win over a winless opponent. We have a theme here in this region, Alex. Sherwood Fairview in the playoffs with a win over 1-3 Tenora this week. Tenora is currently 19th, 99% of the way in if they could win that game. And remember, they were the team that lost on that controversial field goal ruling last week. Tenora probably much better than a 1-3 record indicates. As we mentioned in our second score of the week, 2-2 Van Buren probably needed an upset to reach the playoffs, and the win against 3-1 Arlington gives them now an 84% chance of reaching the postseason. If they can win over 2-2 Riverdale this week, that certainly won't hurt their odds any. Riverdale, currently number 17, they need this win just to have a 7% chance of staying in postseason contention. So a big game for Riverdale. We'll see if Van Buren remains on a high or if they have a letdown after their big win last. 2-2 Convoy Crestview and 2-2 Allen East both dropped 3 positions after losing last week, and now they face each other this Friday. Both teams are probable for the playoffs if they win. Both teams have a less than 50% chance at the playoffs if they lose. So this is a huge game. Make sure you pay attention when you see the scores roll in Friday night to that one. And winless Wayne Trace You wouldn't think they'd be in very good shape, but they have a 65% chance at the playoffs if they can pull off a 9-point upset over 3-1 Edgerton this week. So Wayne Trace, suffering a bit from a tougher schedule to start the season, I believe, still has a shot at the playoffs.
When you say 9-point upset, you don't mean winning by 9 points. You mean that there's a 9-point difference between their positions?
I mean that the computers say Edgerton should beat Wayne Trace by 9 points. So, but
it doesn't matter if they win. It doesn't matter how many points they win by.
Correct. They just have to win. That was just a definition of how much of an upset it would be. According to a computer somewhere. All right. In Division 6, we also follow Region 23, 2 teams there. 3-1 Mechanicsburg rose 7 places to number 11 by beating 2-2 Cedarville. So they were not in the top 16 last week. This week they are. More points await them if they can get a win over 2-2 Springfield Catholic Central this week. And Triad at 1-3, not really expected to win again this season. So they're going to need a couple of upsets if they want to challenge for the playoffs.
Oof, a 1-9 season.
Yeah. They're not fun, are they?
Nope.
Division 6, Region 24. We're going to start with Coldwater. They are 4-0. They look good to finish in the top 4, win or lose against 4-0 Minster this week. Actually, I think the Cavaliers will finish number 1 in this region, win or lose this week. They look to be the force that will dominate Region 24. In the 4th spot is 2-2 Anna. They drop 1 place from number 3 after losing to Coldwater last week.
Makes sense.
If they can get a win against 2-2 St. Henry this week, that should lock up a playoff berth. Again, not the toughest region here. If they can also get a win over 1-3 Delphi St. John's next week, those 2 wins combined should give the Rockets a home postseason game. Should it make sure they finish in the top 8. At 3-1, Covington is listed as the 4th most improved team in Ohio this season from Drew Pasteur's computer. They had a tough year last year, 1-9, 0-10, something like that. The Buccaneers moved up 2 spots to number 6 this week. They are underdogs in their final 6 games. But again, how much of that is because the computer still remembers last year, maybe just a little too much. If they want to make sure they get into the playoffs, they're going to need 1 upset. Well, they are probably going to need 1 upset, not for sure, but probably. But if they lose all 6, the computers say they're about 50-50 right now. So they may have done all they need for the playoffs. You don't want to be waiting the last week to see if you hit a 50-50 chance. Covington needs 1 more win along the way. Feel a lot better. And finally, we have Lima Perry at 2-2. They probably still need 3 more wins, and they are favored in exactly 3 games. They are not, however, favored this week when they play 3-1 Hardin Northern. So they'll be a team to keep an eye on later in the season. Moving down to Division 7, Region 26. The region from heck sometimes when we're doing this because we cover so many teams here. 3-1 Hardin Northern and 2-2 Pandora Gilboa joined the club with 4-0 Columbus Grove, 3-1 Upper Saito Valley, and 3-1 Macomb. They are all listed as playoff bound already. The top team in the region, Columbus Grove, 4-0. They are a 4-7 touchdown favorite in their next 5 weeks. So they're not expected to be challenged anytime until they play Bluffton in week 10. So expect Columbus Grove to secure that number 1 seed at the end of the season. 3-1 Arlington. They only dropped 1 place to number 3 after losing that score of the week game to Van Buren. They may fall further as they are an underdog to 2-2 Pandora Gilboa this week. Pandora Gilboa is 13th right now. They should secure a home playoff game if they win the 5 games they are heavily favored to win the rest of the season. Next, we have 3-1 Lima Central Catholic. They are currently number 6 in the standings. They secure their playoff berth if they can get a win over 2-2 Fort Laramie. Lima Central Catholic and Fort Laramie had some very good games the last couple of years. I expect nothing different this week. 3-1 Ada, pretty much in the same place. They secure their playoff berth if they can beat 3-1 Macomb on Friday. 3-1 Upper Soto Valley will close in on a home playoff game if they beat 1-3 Ridgemont this week. The same applies to 3-1 Hardin Northern, who faces 2-2 Lima Perry, and 3-1 Macomb, who plays 3-1 Ada. All those teams with a win getting real close to securing their top 8 spot in the home playoff. The other 8 teams we follow in this region all lost last week. Of those, 2-2 Lipsick is likely in the playoffs with a win over winless Arcadia this week. And believe it or not, so is 1-3 Delphos St. John's if they can get a win over 1-3 Fort Recovery. Oh yeah, St. John's had a win over Sidney Lehman to start the season. Lehman may end up the season at 9-1 or at least 8-2, and the points are just rolling in for Delphos St. John's from that victory. At 2-2, Antwerp has about a 50-50 shot at the playoffs if they can beat 1-3 Hicksville this week. Unfortunately, 1-3 Delphos Jefferson, 1-3 Corey Rawson, 0-4 Defiance Ayersville, 0-4 Arcadia, and 0-4 Van Loo. They're all in deep trouble. They're going to need several upsets to get back into contention. And that brings us to our last 11-man football region, Division 7, Region 28. We now have 8 teams we follow that are playoff bound already, with Ridgemont, Sidney Lehman, and Ansonia joining this list. We're going to start with number 1, Marion Local. They had a 71-0 win over Delphos St. John's this week.
Ooh.
As I understand it, that is the most points Marion Local has ever scored since Coach Goodwin has been there. Not sure the details of how that happened, but the Marion Local reserves, I'm sure, had a very effective second half. Marion Local is now an 85% favorite to win the Division 7 state championship game, according to the computers. By the way, Columbus Grove from Region 26 looks like their main challenger. Maybe Minster here in this region. We shall see in a couple of weeks.
But not for the championship game.
No, they would have to fight it out for the regional title, of course. They cannot meet in the state championship game. Be such a shame. You could play that like at Wapakoneta or something. New Bremen.
Yeah.
Be very nice. Anyway, we'll go back to some teams that are a lock to make the playoffs. We'll start with 4-0 Minster. They could lock up a home playoff game and probably a top 4 finish if they can upset 4-0 Coldwater this week. The same goes for 3-1 New Bremen, but they would have to upset Marion Local for that to happen. Both those teams may finish in the top 4 anyway. They're just not going to guarantee it this week without an upset win. At 3-1, Sidney Lehman almost locks up a home playoff game with a win over 3-1 Miami East. And so does the winner of the game between 3-1 Ansonia and 3-1 Tri-Village. 2-2 Waynesfield Goshen is a 74% favorite to get a home playoff game if they can beat 2-2 North Baltimore this week. While 3-1 Ridgemont is a 60% favorite for a home playoff game if they can beat 1-3 Montpelier. At 2-2, Fort Laramie rose from number 15 all the way up to number 7 by beating 2-2 Convoy Crestview last week.
Wow.
That was quite the jump for them. If they can get a win over 3-1 Lima Central Catholic, that puts the Redskins in the playoffs. Although, to be honest, I think they're in even with a loss too. They're looking good. It's not the strongest region at the bottom, and Fort Laramie has some very winnable games coming up the rest of the season. 2-2 DeGraff Riverside also took a big jump. They went from number 16 up to number 9 with a 7-point win over Tip City Bethel last week. If they can beat 1-3 Northridge, it locks down a playoff spot and makes a home game very likely for Riverside. Now, this seems a little unfair. 2-2 St. Henry defeated 1-3 Fort Recovery and did not rise at all in the standings this week. However, if they can get a win over 2-2 Anna, that puts them in the playoffs. And more likely than not, they will be hosting a home playoff game. And much like in the last region we covered, we have 1-3 Fort Recovery, 1-3 Miss Cinnamal Valley, 0-4 Bradford, and 0-4 Troy Christian. Deep postseason qualification trouble right now. And we'll wrap things up here with our 8-man division. Still fairly early in the 8-man season. They've only played 3 weeks so far. Toledo Christian, Sandusky St. Mary, Holgate, and Fremont St. Joe are all 1-0 in conference play. So if the season ended today, they would be your playoff teams. Fortunately, the season doesn't end today. They have 7 more weeks to go.
So that seems like a lot.
Yep. They didn't play in week 1, and they play through the first week of the playoffs for 11-man football. The 8-man is still in their regular season. They decided not to start so early because they only have a 2-week playoff instead of a 6-week-long playoff.
Oh.
I
was interpreting that in my head as having a shorter season for some reason. It's a shorter playoff season, not a shorter regular season. Got it.
There you go. Lakeside Danbury actually has not played a conference game yet. They start this week. There's a full slate of 4 Northern 8 conference matchups this week, so we'll start to see the conference standings shake out a little. And if you remember, for some reason, they choose not to use our computer rankings for picking their playoff teams. They go straight by conference standings. So that's why we keep reminding you of those. Although I keep forgetting to ask what they do for tiebreaker if there's a tie.
Maybe if somebody knows, they can write in and let you know.
Yep. Or I'll get a hold of the commissioner again one of these days and ask him. That would probably be the smart move, right?
Right.
All righty. That wraps up week 4. If you have a comment, question for us, it can be sent to bdmonin@nktelco.net. Right, Jack?
Right.
Or submit it on X to @BruceMonin. Jack agrees. Send those questions, Jack says. Or you can place your thoughts in the comments section on our YouTube page. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast wherever fine podcasts are downloaded, such as Apple iTunes Store, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, or on our YouTube channel. Just search for Bruce Monin's Computer Points. It pops right up. I will be back next week after week 5 of the regular season. Rebecca will still be on hiatus, but Alex will be back, except this time we'll send her things ahead of time. She'll be prepared for full co-host duties, correct?
Correct.
I kind of pressed her into things like 2 minutes before broadcasting here. So thanks a lot for helping out, Alex. Thanks for bringing Jack.
Say bye.
And Jack says bye. So long, everybody.
Bye.